I never thought I would become a widow at 34. Life has a cruel way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. Here I am, Dakota, sitting at my kitchen table at 7 in the morning, juggling a mug of cold coffee in one hand and trying to get my 7-year-old son Tommy ready for school. My mind is scattered and my eyes sting from tears I thought I had already cried out. It has been 8 months since the accident. 8 long, exhausting months since Mark, my husband, was taken from us in a construction site accident. Sometimes the grief feels like a shadow that never leaves. One moment I think I am coping. The next, a simple smell or sound can bring the pain rushing back as if it all happened yesterday. The first few months after his death were an overwhelming blur of funeral arrangements, mountains of paperwork, sleepless nights, and a constant stream of tears. I was drowning in responsibilities, trying to stay afloat for Tommy's sake. I honestly do not know how I would have made it through without Sarah and Jim, Mark's parents. They stepped in like angels, picking Tommy up from school every day and giving me the breathing room to focus on work. Sarah and Jim have always been generous, but since Mark passed, their kindness has been relentless. Every time I pick Tommy up from their place after work, they try to give me money. It is almost like a routine now. Just last week, Sarah casually slipped an envelope into my purse when I was not looking. "Sarah, really, I cannot take this," I protested, pushing the envelope back toward her. Her eyes softened as she placed a hand on my shoulder. "Dakota, sweetie, we want to help. We know the insurance company paid well, but you are family. Let us do this." She was not wrong. The insurance company did pay out $300,000 after Mark's death. It is enough to keep us stable for a long time, especially with my job as a marketing manager. But Sarah and Jim's generosity is not about money. It is about love, the kind that fills the void in ways nothing else can. It is a love I wish I could say I felt from my own parents, but that has never been the case. My parents have always favored my older sister, Rachel. She has been their pride and joy for as long as I can remember, and now that favoritism has extended to her kids. Whenever Tommy and I visit, it is like walking into a museum of disapproval. Last weekend was no different. Tommy was excited to see his grandparents, but within 20 minutes, the tension was thick in the air. "Why does the clock make that sound?" Tommy asked curiously, pointing to their antique grandfather clock. "How does it work inside?" Mom sighed, exasperated, as if a simple question were a monumental burden. "Dakota, can't you control him? He is always asking questions about everything. Rachel's kids never give us this much trouble." Dad nodded in agreement, barely looking up from his laptop. "Here, Tommy, why don't you play some games? I downloaded new ones." But Tommy did not want games. He wanted connection. He wanted to talk, to learn. Meanwhile, Rachel's 3 kids sat in the corner, eyes glued to their phones, completely detached from the world around them. And yet, my parents held that up as ideal behavior. I have grown used to it. The comparisons, the constant reminder that I am not enough. I bite my tongue and shake my head in silence when they praise Rachel's parenting while subtly criticizing mine. At least they help with Tommy once in a while, watching him during my late meetings or picking him up if Sarah and Jim are unavailable. Small mercies, I suppose. Then came Tuesday dinner, an evening I will not forget anytime soon. From the moment I walked in, I should have known something was off. Mom had made lasagna, my favorite. She only does that when she wants something. Dad was unusually talkative, asking about work, about Tommy, about every little thing. They were clearly building up to something, though I had no clue what it was. "So, Dakota," Mom began, her voice overly sweet as she carefully sliced her lasagna into perfect squares. "We have been meaning to ask you something." I should have braced myself, but I didn't. "How much was Mark's life insurance payout?" The question hit me like a brick to the chest. I froze, the fork halfway to my mouth. I barely managed to swallow my water without choking. Of all the things they could have asked, this was what they wanted to know. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe I was just tired of keeping things from them, but I answered honestly. "About $300,000, I said quietly. The sound of Mom's fork clattering against her plate echoed through the room. Dad's head snapped up so fast I thought he might get whiplash. They stared at me like I had just told them I had won the lottery. "Well," Mom said, setting her fork down with deliberate care, "what are you planning to do with all that money?" The weight of their expectations pressed down on me like a boulder. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my voice steady. "I have invested it. It is for Tommy's future, his college, maybe helping him buy an apartment someday. Mark and I always talked about that." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "But that is years away. You should be thinking about the present, Dakota, about yourself and your family." And I knew exactly what he meant by family, not Tommy. They wanted me to help them, just like they had helped Rachel with her house down payment and her extravagant wedding. "You could do so much with that money now," Mom chimed in, leaning forward eagerly. "You could help your family, people who need it today, not save it all for some distant future." I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I am not discussing my money anymore." The room fell into an awkward silence. I could feel their disappointment like a cold draft. But I did not care. I was done being the scapegoat, done sacrificing for a family that had never truly been there for me. My priority now is Tommy. He deserves better. We both do. The silence after Rachel's words was so thick I could feel it pressing down on my chest. Dad's expression darkened, his disappointment settling on his face like a storm cloud, a look I knew all too well from my childhood. Mom's lips thinned to that tight line she always wore when things were about to take a turn for the worse. The rest of the meal dragged on in stifling silence, broken only by the metallic scrape of forks against our plates. I figured that was the end of it. In typical fashion, my parents would probably freeze me out for a month. That was their way, punishment through silence when I didn't measure up to their standards. But then something unexpected happened. Mom called exactly a week later. Her voice was warm, almost too warm, like nothing had happened. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday," she announced cheerfully. "Rachel and the kids will be there too. You have to come, sweetie." The sudden invitation unsettled me, but I found myself agreeing before I had time to overthink it. When Sunday rolled around, I walked into my parents' house to find Rachel already seated with her kids. Predictably, they were buried in their phones, thumbs moving like they were performing a symphony of indifference. We took our seats, and Rachel wasted no time launching into a monologue about how hard life had become. "Everything is just so expensive now," she sighed dramatically, passing the bowl of mashed potatoes. "We can barely afford a normal life anymore." Mom dabbed at her eyes like a tragic heroine, nodding along. "Groceries, utilities, it's all piling up," she lamented softly. Rachel sat up straighter, her voice taking on that self-important tone she'd mastered since we were kids. "I've been thinking," she began, pausing just long enough for everyone to look her way. "Dakota and I should step up and help Mom and Dad financially. I'll send them $500 a month. I wish I could do more, but Jack's the only one working, and with 3 kids..." She let the sentence dangle, her gaze sliding over to me. Then, with a smile that was more of a smirk, she added, "But you, Dakota, you should send $1,000 every month." I nearly choked on my water. "Excuse me?" Rachel's eyes gleamed with that familiar condescension. "Well, it makes sense. You have a good job and only 1 child to take care of. Plus, with your situation, you have other income now." My face burned. She wouldn't even say his name. "Mark, my husband, dead and gone." That other income she mentioned? It was the life insurance meant to secure our son's future, not to fund my parents' convenience. But before I could say anything, Mom clapped her hands together, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Oh, girls, you don't know what this means to us," she gushed, while Dad beamed like he'd just unwrapped the perfect Christmas gift. The words of protest died on my tongue. I had spent my whole life chasing their approval, and here it was, wrapped in a price tag. My stomach churned, but I heard myself say, "Fine, I'll do it." The first transfer was like ripping out a piece of my soul, $1,000 gone with a few taps on my phone. I told myself it would be worth it if it meant they'd be more supportive, especially with Tommy. That illusion didn't last long. "Mom, could you pick up Tommy from school today? Sarah has a doctor's appointment and I have a late meeting," I asked one afternoon. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," Mom's voice crackled through the phone. "I've got such a headache. You know how my migraines are." It was always something. Her back hurt. She had errands to run. She was tired. Meanwhile, the $1,000 vanished from my account like clockwork every month. Then came that Thursday. I was desperate. Mom had once again claimed she might be coming down with something. Out of options, I called Sarah, my mother-in-law. "Of course we'll pick him up," she said without hesitation. "Jim's already on his way. He loves their little chats on the drive home. Tommy's been telling him all about their science project." I hung up, blinking back tears. $1,000 a month bought me nothing but excuses from my own mother, while my mother-in-law never hesitated to help without expecting anything in return. Before I knew it, December was upon us. Christmas had always been at my parents' house, a tradition of gift exchanges, big meals, and forced family bonding. A week before the holiday, my phone lit up with Mom's number. I was helping Tommy with his homework when I answered, my stomach nodding in anticipation. "Hi, sweetie," Mom chirped, her tone too chipper to be casual. "We're so excited for Christmas this year. I have some news." "Dakota, honey," she started, using that syrupy sweet tone that always carried bad news, like a prelude to a disaster. "About Christmas Eve," she continued, "we've decided to do something different this year. We're having an adults-only party. No children allowed." The pencil I was holding snapped in half before I even realized what had happened. "What?" I managed to say, my voice flat with shock. "It's just that we want to try something a bit more sophisticated this year," Mom said casually, like she was discussing a change in dinner plans. You know, wine, adult conversation, that sort of thing. "But it's Christmas," I protested, lowering my voice and stepping away so Tommy couldn't overhear. "What am I supposed to do with him?" "Oh, that's easy," she replied, her tone disturbingly light. "Leave him with Sarah and Jim. They'd love to have him, I'm sure. So you'll come by around 7? When the call ended, I stood there in a daze, staring at Tommy. He was sitting at the kitchen table working through his multiplication problems, completely unaware that his grandmother had just uninvited him from Christmas. My heart ached as I watched him. He looked so much like his father at that age, tongue sticking out in concentration the same way Mark's used to. For the next week, I couldn't stop debating what to do. The idea of celebrating Christmas without Tommy felt inherently wrong, but skipping the family gathering altogether seemed too drastic. After much internal struggle, I came up with a compromise. I would drop Tommy off with Sarah and Jim for a few hours, make an appearance at my parents' house to exchange gifts, and then head back to celebrate the rest of the evening with my in-laws and son. On Christmas Eve, I pulled up to my parents' house alone, a bag of carefully wrapped presents resting in the passenger seat beside me. The driveway was packed with cars, far more than usual. As I approached the front door, I could hear laughter and Christmas music spilling out into the cold night air. I stepped inside, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt sideways. The house was teeming with relatives, my aunts, uncles, cousins, but that wasn't what made my stomach drop. No, it was the sight of children, everywhere. Rachel's 3 kids were running through the living room with paper crowns on their heads. Near the Christmas tree, my cousin Linda's children were helping themselves to a platter of cookies. More kids appeared in my line of sight. Mark's twins, Susan's teenager. The air felt stifling, the noise overwhelming. I stood there frozen in the doorway, the gift bag slipping from my hand as the realization hit me. This wasn't an adults-only party at all. It was a party where only my son wasn't welcome. Aunt Marie was the first to notice me. "Dakota, sweetheart," she called out, rushing over to hug me. Her eyes scanned the room. "Where's little Tommy? Don't tell me he's sick on Christmas Eve." Before I could respond, my cousin Peter chimed in. "Yeah, where's our favorite little scientist? Jake's been dying to show him his new chemistry set." More relatives gathered around, all asking the same question. Where was Tommy? Why had I come alone? Each inquiry was like a knife twisting in my gut. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. I didn't even understand what was happening myself. Through the crowd, I spotted my mother in the kitchen. She was arranging cookies on a Christmas platter, completely unbothered, as if everything was perfectly normal, as if she hadn't excluded her only grandson from a family celebration. "Excuse me," I muttered, pushing through the concerned faces and making my way to the kitchen. My feet moved on autopilot, the anger inside me building with every step. "Mom," I said once I reached her, my voice low but firm. "Can we talk?" "Privately." She glanced up, sensing the tension in my tone. Silently, she put down the platter and followed me into the hallway. "You told me this was an adults-only party," I began, barely able to contain the tremor in my voice. "You specifically told me not to bring Tommy, so why are Rachel's kids here and Linda's? And Mark's?" Mom smoothed the front of her Christmas sweater, avoiding eye contact. "Well, that's different." "Different how?" I asked, my voice rising. "Those children," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the living room, "know how to behave at formal gatherings. They're well-mannered." I stared at her, incredulous. "Well-mannered? Are you serious? Tommy is one of the most polite children I know. His teachers praise his behavior all the time. Sarah and Jim always—" "Oh, Sarah and Jim," Mom interrupted with a dismissive wave. "They spoil him. They encourage all those endless questions of his. The other children, they know how to act. They deserve to be here. They know their place." Before I could respond, a loud commotion erupted from the dining room. Rachel's youngest son, Kevin, was gleefully pelting his sister with deviled eggs, shrieking with laughter. I turned back to my mother, my expression hard. "Well-mannered, huh?" She had the decency to look flustered for a moment, but quickly composed herself. "Kevin's just excited. It's Christmas after all." I could only shake my head, disbelief giving way to a deep, simmering fury. Tommy wasn't here because of some arbitrary, prejudiced idea of who belonged in this family. And that realization hit harder than any Christmas miracle ever could. The eggs flew in a perfect arc across the room, bursting against Emily's new Christmas dress like paint on a blank canvas. Her high-pitched shriek echoed as conversations momentarily stopped, followed by awkward chuckles from a few relatives. I slowly turned to look at my mother, raising an eyebrow, my expression speaking volumes. "Superior manners on full display," I muttered under my breath. Mom's lips pressed into a tight line. "They're just kids being kids," she replied, her tone dismissive. "Oh, right. But when Tommy asks a few innocent questions about how things work, that's suddenly unacceptable behavior?" I shot back. "Stop being so dramatic, Dakota. He gets along fine with Sarah and Jim," she said with a wave of her hand, as if my concerns were irrelevant. I sighed, the familiar weight of frustration settling over me like a heavy blanket. "I'm leaving," I announced, turning on my heel toward the door. "I'm going back to my son." Mom barely flinched. She inspected her nails with nonchalance. "Fine. If you want to make a scene, go ahead, but leave your gifts under the tree first. We're opening them after dinner." Something snapped inside me at that moment. For years, I had swallowed their comments, their manipulations, their subtle exclusions. Not this time. I paused mid-step, turning back toward the center of the living room. The glow of the Christmas tree flickered behind me as I cleared my throat, the sharp sound cutting through the holiday music. Conversations halted, and a sea of curious faces turned toward me. Several of you have asked why I came alone tonight, I began, my voice calm but firm. Why Tommy isn't here celebrating Christmas with his family. Rachel stood and took a hesitant step forward, her eyes darting nervously between me and our mother. I raised a hand to stop her. Let me finish, I continued, feeling an unexpected surge of confidence. I'm here alone because a week ago, Mom called and told me this was an adults-only party. I was specifically told not to bring Tommy. A gasp broke the silence. What? Aunt Marie's voice sliced through the tension. But all the children are here. We didn't hear anything about a no-kids rule, Uncle Steve added, frowning as he glanced around at the other adults. Mom's face flushed a deep red as she stepped forward. Dakota, this is not the time for this. Oh, I think it is exactly the time, I countered, my voice rising. Because, as you can all see, there wasn't a ban on children, there was a ban on one child. My child. Tommy. Apparently he isn't good enough to attend this family's Christmas celebration. The room erupted in a flurry of murmurs. Disapproving glares were directed at my parents. Some children watched the scene unfold, their eyes wide with confusion as their parents exchanged hushed comments. But that's not even the best part, I added with a humorless laugh. While my son isn't good enough for Christmas, I'm apparently good enough to send my parents $1,000 every month. And Rachel here sends them $500. Jack, Rachel's husband, stiffened in his seat, his head snapping toward her. Wait, what? $500? What, $500? Rachel froze, her complexion paling as Jack's bewildered gaze bored into her. You're sending money to your parents every month? He asked incredulously. From where? Our account barely covers the bills as it is. I never actually sent any money, Rachel stammered, her voice cracking. Mom and Dad asked me to say I was sending $500 so that Dakota would agree to help them financially. They said she'd be more willing if she thought I was contributing too. The room fell into a suffocating silence as realization dawned on the faces around me. Whispers rippled through the crowd as my relatives pieced together the truth. My parents had deceived not only me, but the entire family. Aunt Caroline stepped forward, her voice cutting like a blade. You mean to tell me you scammed your own daughter out of thousands of dollars? You're nothing but scammers, using your daughter like an ATM while treating her child like dirt. That's low, even for you. The room erupted again, overlapping voices expressing outrage, demanding explanations. Rachel's face burned with humiliation as she tried in vain to reason with Jack, who was growing more furious by the second. My parents stood stiffly near the tree, their carefully curated facade crumbling before everyone's eyes. I raised my hand, silencing the clamor. I have something else to say. The room hushed once more. Every gaze returned to me. This ends now, I declared. From this moment on, I will no longer be sending you any money, and I won't be maintaining any relationship with you or Rachel. I'm done. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the door. I left the bag of gifts by the entrance without a second thought. The door closed behind me with a finality that echoed in my mind. It felt like the closing of a long overdue chapter in my life. Sitting in my car, I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app and with a few taps, canceled the monthly transfer to my mother's account. It was as though I had severed a chain I had unknowingly dragged behind me for years. The relief washed over me, warm and liberating. I smiled for the first time that evening and started the engine, ready to go home to the one person who truly mattered, my son. The drive to Sarah and Jim's house that night felt like stepping into another world. The tension from the argument with my parents still clung to me like a heavy fog, but as I pulled into their driveway, the sight of Tommy in the window began to dissolve it. He was giggling, perched on a stool next to Sarah, icing sugar cookies with reckless abandon. His little hands were covered in sprinkles, and his face lit up with the kind of joy I had not seen in him for a long time. Tears welled up in my eyes. This was where we needed to be, where we were wanted. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve wrapped in warmth and laughter. We decorated more cookies, sang carols until Tommy's voice got hoarse, and watched Jim let him take the lead in arranging the nativity scene on their mantel. Tommy's eyes sparkled with pride as he carefully positioned each figurine. This, I thought, was what family should feel like: safe, joyful, and free from manipulation. The next morning, while Tommy slept soundly among the mountain of presents Santa had delivered, my phone buzzed. It was Aunt Caroline. Her voice was direct, no greetings or small talk. You might want to hear what happened after you left, she said. I sat up straighter, already sensing something big had gone down. After you walked out, it was like a dam broke, she continued. Uncle Mike couldn't stand it anymore. He got up and said he wouldn't stay in that house another minute. Then Aunt Marie and Uncle Steve followed. Soon, everyone was grabbing their coats and kids and leaving. Nobody even said goodbye to your parents. And the things they said, wow, they weren't holding back. Lots of loud comments about manipulation and shame. And Jack? I asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. She sighed. Honey, he was livid, packed up his kids on the spot. Told Rachel he needed time to think about their marriage and took the kids to his parents' house for Christmas. Rachel was a mess, crying. Your parents were scrambling to do damage control, but it was too late. Everyone knows now. I let her words sink in. For the first time in a long while, I felt vindicated. We're on your side, Dakota. What they did to you and Tommy, it's unforgivable, she added softly. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, processing it all. My phone began to buzz again, a flood of texts from my mom, dad, and even Rachel. Apologies filled the screen. We are so sorry. We were wrong. Please talk to us. We can explain. I read each message once, then calmly archived them. I was done. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed peacefully. Tommy and I spent our evenings playing board games with Sarah and Jim, watching holiday movies, and finding joy in the little things. Tommy was thriving here, surrounded by people who loved him unconditionally. For the first time in a long while, I felt at ease. Then, on New Year's Eve morning, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw them, Mom and Dad, standing awkwardly on the porch, clutching an oversized, elaborately wrapped package. My heart raced as I debated whether to open the door. Dakota, we know you are home, Mom called out. Please, we just want to talk. After a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped into the frame, blocking their path inside. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than I remembered. We brought this for Tommy, Dad said, holding out the package. I could see the logo from a high-end electronics store under the wrapping. He doesn't need it, I replied flatly, making no move to take the gift. Dakota, please, Mom said, her voice breaking. We know we were wrong, the way we treated Tommy, the manipulation with the money. We are truly sorry. This is not about the money, Dad added quickly. We feel terrible. We really do. I searched their faces, waiting for the truth to reveal itself. Are you sorry because you genuinely understand what you did was wrong, or are you just sorry because everyone else knows now and will not speak to you? They exchanged a quick glance, and that was all I needed to see. I think you should leave, I said quietly. I do not believe you, and I do not trust you. Not anymore. But we are family, Mom protested, tears streaming down her face. No, I shook my head firmly. Family does not manipulate or exclude. Family does not lie and scheme for money. What you did, that is not family. They hesitated, perhaps hoping I would soften, but eventually they turned and walked back to their car, still clutching the unwanted gift. I watched them drive away, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. I had taken my power back. In the months that followed, I maintained my boundaries. I ignored their calls and blocked their numbers. Rachel tried reaching out too, but I shut that door without hesitation. The money I used to send my parents now went into Tommy's college fund. With the toxic people gone, there was suddenly so much room for new, healthier connections. Aunt Caroline began inviting us to Sunday dinners. Uncle Mike hosted barbecues where Tommy played with his cousins. He blossomed under the attention of relatives who truly cared about him. One sunny afternoon, as Tommy asked about the funny smell from Uncle Mike's pool, Mike enthusiastically launched into a lesson on chlorine and water treatment. Tommy listened, wide-eyed with curiosity, soaking in every word. This was our life now, peaceful, filled with love and joy. Tommy started calling Sarah and Jim Grandma and Grandpa, and they embraced the role without hesitation. They were our rocks, our safe harbor in any storm. We had finally found our family,